I hadn't seen any real evidence for it until these files. And now I'm like, oh, this is demonic. This is clearly demonic.
In the past few videos on this channel, we've pointed out that you might not believe in the spiritual world, but the people who are shaping the culture do.
It's not that hidden.
You might not believe in other intelligent entities in the universe, but a lot of people, including Richard Dawkins, Billy Carson, and a host of other influential thought leaders, do.
As we venture deep into the heart of the Anunnaki enigma, where these celestial creators may have sculpted the very fabric of our existence.
And the more that I've studied it, I actually believe that Anu is God. It is the source and creator of the entire universe.
What is the root of all of this? And I came across a fascinating lecture from a biblical scholar named Michael Heiser, who tethers all of this back to the Tower of Babel event and explains what likely went on there in a way that at least was new to me. So I hope you'll enjoy this. I hope this will fit another piece into the puzzle for you. Let's dive in.
The third rebellion. This is the Sunday school story we all know, but we never see. Because again, we're cut off from some material. We all know the story of Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. What we don't know is this one. When the Most High, again, that's not a brain teaser, we know who that is. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, and when he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Wait a minute. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, and divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God? But the Lord's portion, but Yahweh's portion is his people. Jacob is his allotted heritage. Okay, when was humanity divided into nations? That would be Babel. So when God did that, when he punished humanity because he wanted them to overspread the earth, God repeats the Edenic mandate after the flood to Noah and his sons, and it's from his sons that all the nations in Genesis 10, derive from in some way. Instead of overspreading the earth, though, they congregated a place called Babel, and they built a tower, to make themselves a great name. So God says, okay, this is like the opposite of what I asked you to do. So let me get this straight, God says. We had a fall in Eden. You got expelled from that, and that meant death and estrangement from me, your Father and your Creator. Then we unfortunately had another supernatural rebellion to deal with, Genesis 6:1-4. The result of that was the proliferation of evil and wickedness and depravity among the human population. It was so great that I looked down and I saw that every inclination of the human heart was only evil continually. That's Genesis 6:5. So I sent a flood, but we saved a remnant out of the flood. And I gave them 120 years to repent, but basically nobody did. But now, when you guys get out of the ark and you have kids, I show up and I repeat the Edenic mandate because there is no plan B. We're sticking with plan A here. I want a family. I want you and my family. I want to return to earth, and I want the earth to become Eden. But it has to start right here. Okay, you got to start with the original job. You've got to be loyal to me. Obey. You're not going to earn your salvation. If you believe that I am the Most High, that I am your Creator, I am your Father, you believe that I want the things that you want, I want to give them to you. If you believe that I am who I say I am, let's get with the plan here. Be my partner. Be my child, be my partner. And so what does humanity do? Now, we'd like to build a tower. Because if we build a tower, then we're going to become famous. So it's a little more than that, because everybody agrees, biblical scholars agree, that the tower they built was a ziggurat. If you know a little bit about ziggurats, it helps. Ziggurats were part of temple complexes in ancient Mesopotamia. You built a ziggurat to connect heaven and earth, and you would meet at that place to offer sacrifice and barter with the god were the gods. A ziggurat, part of a temple complex, was something you built to bring the deity to you. And God's like, that's really not the idea. Okay, I don't come at your beck and call. Okay, the God of Israel will not be tamed. This is what the thinking was about building, these temple complexes. And God says, okay, here we are again. You don't want to be loyal to me. You don't want me to be your God. You don't want these things. I'm going to give you what you apparently are asking for. I'm going to give you a divorce. I'm going to disinherit you. I'm going to cut you off from me. I'm going to disperse you and divide you up geographically, and I'm going to assign each of you, each of the nations, to one of the sons of God. And they're going to get assigned to you too. And what I want them to do, again, this is wider in the Old Testament, what I want them to do is I want them to essentially be placeholders. I still love humanity. I don't want humanity enslaved and destroyed and corrupted and basically ground into dust. And I certainly don't want humans to worship the other gods because I'm their maker. So what I want is I want the nations ruled justly according to, my character and my principles. But I'm done with you. I'm going to judge your wickedness, and we're going to see how that goes. In the meantime, verse 9, here's what we're going to do. There is no plan B. So what I'm going to do, if you're not willing to be loyal to me, is I'm going to create more humans. I'm going to take one guy from Ur, his name is Abram, and his wife is Sarah, and they're perfect because they can't have kids. They're perfect because I'm going to supernaturally enable them to have a child so that everybody knows this nation, their descendants exist because of my power. That's what we're going to do. So this is what he does. What happens in the biblical storyline right after Babel? Genesis 12, what is it? It's the covenant with Abram. So God is still interested in the nations because when he makes a covenant with Abram and he promises him a seed, he says it's going to be through your seed that all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. And Paul later on picks up on this idea and he talks about, the seed was actually like one seed, it was Jesus, and of course he goes all the way back through Abraham and the genealogies and all that stuff. And it's going to be the Messiah who is going to reunite the earth, reunite the nations. This is the plan. So God abandons them. Now what this leads to, if you want good bedtime reading, you can read my article about Deuteronomy 32:8. Now, most of your Bibles will say sons of Israel. He divided them up according to the number of the sons of Israel or the children of Israel. The Dead Sea Scrolls say sons of God. Here I made you a nice little picture of the Dead Sea Scroll. If you read Hebrew, it's B'nai Elohim, sons of God. And I talk about this scroll in that article. But you don't need to be a textual critic. Think about the story. The nations are divided at Babel, and they're divided up according to the sons of Israel. Israel didn't exist yet. They're only going to exist after Babel. So it makes no sense to divide the nations up according to the number of the sons of Israel, because Israel, what's that? They don't even exist. Again, the correct reading is sons of God, like the Dead Sea Scrolls have. It's the oldest text we have, and so we should go with it. ESV goes with it, NLT, NRSV. Some of your mainline translations have incorporated the Dead Sea Scrolls into that passage, and they should, because it makes a lot of sense. Now, ultimately what happens here, let's go back to Psalm 82. Israel, the plan is that God has abandoned the nations, and Israel is supposed to be his family, and his family is supposed to be, think of how Israel is described in the Old Testament, a kingdom of priests. There's one. What do priests do? They're mediators between God and men. Yeah, sure.
Don't lose your thought.
Okay.
Just because so many people don't know, I want them to understand. When you're saying in the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Yeah.
you're talking about the biblical text.
The biblical text.
When he says Dead Sea Scrolls, he's talking about the Bible that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. That is the oldest text that we have.
This is Deuteronomy 32 preserved in one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's a good point. The Dead Sea Scrolls, two categories, biblical and non-biblical. Biblical scrolls are copies of the Hebrew Bible. Non-biblical stuff is stuff that's not the Hebrew Bible. So it's real easy to remember. But if you go to Psalm 82, again, Israel was supposed to be the mediator between God, the true God, and all these other nations. See, what happens at Babel is the Old Testament explanation for why the other nations have other gods, where pantheons come from. Because the sons of God who are given charge over the nations don't do a good job. Here's what they do. We read it earlier today in Psalm 82. God is judging the gods in his council. How long will you judge unjustly? Show partiality to the wicked. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and needy. I mean, you're not doing all this stuff. And the result is, look at what's in, your people have neither knowledge or understanding. They walk about in darkness. The whole foundations of the earth are shaken. Okay, what I wanted was for you to rule justly because I still love humanity. And I want to use my new people, Israel, to be a conduit of truth to them, from me to them, and bring them back into the family. But what you're doing is resulting in chaos throughout the whole earth. The psalm ends with the psalmist saying, "Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations." The psalmist wants this to end. He wants the chaos of the nations taken care of. The reason I have this highlighted, again, we can't go into this either, but if you know what the Septuagint is, it's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. The word here for arise in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible is the word for resurrection. And it happens 3 or 4 times where the resurrection is associated with the reclaiming of the nations. This is just one of several passages. And Paul knows this. He knows it really well. Because 5 or 6 times, Paul, when he talks about the resurrection, he doesn't talk about being his ideal weight. He doesn't talk about getting his hair back, getting better eyesight, or as soon as he thinks of the resurrection, he thinks about the conquest of the rulers, the powers, the principalities. He does it 6 different places. He thinks of one and goes to the other. Now, again, this is the way it was supposed to work, but it doesn't work this way. And what this is the root, and we'll cover this in the last 5 minutes here. This whole idea of God scattering the nations, assigning them to other gods, and those gods become corrupt. They destroy their nations. They turn the hearts of their people to worship them. They turn the hearts of people to idolatry. It's a mess. It's the Old Testament explanation for after the flood, everybody knew who the true God was. After Babel, things just really go downhill. Okay? It turns into the system that we sort of know about the ancient world. You could go to Plato and find the same worldview. You can go to Greco-Roman writers. The pagan world believed the same thing, that they worship the gods they do and their neighbors worship some other god because that's how the Most High wanted it. You'll actually find that in non-biblical pagan texts. Again, when Paul goes to a pagan city, he knows that they share the same worldview, and it's a platform for the gospel. But before we get there, that's going to be the subject of the next session. This is the foundation for what we call spiritual warfare and cosmic geography. Daniel 10, the Prince of Persia, Prince of Greece. Where do we get this idea of supernatural princes over nations? Deuteronomy 32. The Babel story. That's where it begins.